Today we're going to talk about how does external punishment translate for us internally, and how does that happen in relationship to stubbornness. It's a little different, even though it's something that I think you'll all relate to. Just kind of follow the gist and don't hold too tight your thoughts about the past while we're talking about this one. I'm going to start with a story when Sarah, my youngest, was around 2, and we were in a restaurant with a couple of my other kids and some of their friends. And Sarah started to get a little loud and rowdy because everybody else was talking and having fun. And so she wanted to participate too. And she started, doing her 2-year-old speech. The ladies sitting in the booth behind us, you could feel them grimace and be like, it's a baby making noise. This is very interesting because they didn't have a problem with the other adults, because my kids are older. They didn't have a problem with anyone else in the group, laughing and talking and having fun. But when the baby started making noise, it was like, this weight. And I felt this push from them to quiet the 2-year-old. And I, out of habit, responded to that push as starting to quiet the 2-year-old. Now, it's really interesting. I'm very blessed that Sarah and I had a very deep telepathic connection when she was younger. And she talked to me clearly and openly and gave me some great advice. And she said to me in that moment, "I've done nothing wrong. Do not punish me." And I was like, "Oh. Well, honey, I didn't mean to punish you. I just wanted to ask you to be quiet." And, she gave me the feeling of everybody else is the same. We're all equal here. Why does she need to be quiet? And then I had to accept that, she's absolutely right. She is equal in this conversation with the rest of us. And I'm using a social etiquette based on the push from other people to quiet her. And I had to stop myself from falling into this trap of the beliefs of others and say to myself, okay, yes, I'm okay with her talking. I'm okay with her making noise. And I'm eventually going to have to be okay with other people not being okay. It was a bit uncomfortable. But from that moment on, I started to realize more details of how we control ourselves. And again, thank goodness Sarah came along when she did in my life with all of this new information that I could connect to and really start to dig into. Because I started to notice, I felt a stubborn push from the ladies. And I had to look at, okay, this is just habitual. They're not actually having a problem with my 2-year-old. They're just responding to a belief system that 2-year-olds are not supposed to be noisy, and this is a restaurant, and it's not appropriate to have a 2-year-old in a restaurant being noisy. I thought, okay, well, this must be their lesson then, because I'm not going to make the 2-year-old be any more quiet than anyone else at the table. And again, it was uncomfortable because I could feel their push. And by about the time the third push happened, Sarah just started laughing. Not a little loud, but quite loud. And I realized she was responding to my uncomfortableness in the situation. And I thought, wow, thank you. This was her giving me support, that it's okay, Mom. You can get through this. It was a really nice way to start to see that my stubborn behavior, the way I treated myself and those in my sphere of influence, was based on these beliefs from others that were beginning to be outdated. The new generations, they don't hold the same beliefs, and a lot of us are realizing that. I remember when I was a kid, watching other people that were older having to deal with my new generation's beliefs. And I thought, this is a process that everybody goes through. Each generation is going to release something or have a different experience, and it's just natural. So we don't have to feel good or bad about whether another generation understands us or not. So here I am ushering this new generation in of these important children who are going to be confirming and giving us information that we can trust as we move into ascension. And I'm seeing that stubbornness is actually based on a personal history of external punishment, and that these children, they're not using stubborn behavior to handle their situation. My whole generation, we're stubborn and we're persistent, and we have this behind, I'm going to do this because I have to do it. Nobody's going to push me. I'm going to stand here and just be stubborn while I do it too. And I find it so interesting that the new generation coming in couldn't relate to this sense of being and the way we were behaving with this stubbornness. There are some that are picking it up. So, for instance, one of my grandchildren, her mother is a young mother, so she still has some of these other behaviors. She's being taught that, there's a certain amount of control in her experience. And I have a lot more freedom now than I did when I raised this first group of children of mine before this next group. And in that control, I taught them, hey, you need to have these certain kind of manners, and you need to respect this, and the same things my father taught me because I was still indoctrinated. But as I've broken those, the kids that live in my home now don't have that indoctrination, and they have more freedom. And we have a level playing field for most of our conversations of equality. So they can then see how others are not feeling equal in the world. It's so interesting. But let's get back to the stubborn part where it begins externally by somebody controlling us. So in that moment, if I had controlled my 2-year-old, said, hush, sit quietly, no talking, taken her out of the restaurant, threatened her with a swat on her butt if she didn't cooperate. I mean, all the things that I remember going through as a kid, I could have done that. And I would have, again, indoctrinated her into this stubborn behavior that happens next. Because over time, what happens is we start to see the beliefs of others and we accept them as the control, that this is what we must do because this is the right way to behave. And again, I couldn't see anything wrong with it. I thought this was the right way to behave. And we realize that we don't want to harm others. So this goes back to everything comes from love. So others are carrying this belief. They're already carrying it out of balance because they know that there's no truth in it either on an internal side, but they haven't been able to figure out how to not use this control. So we're indoctrinating each other and carrying on and holding this social etiquette in a way that, again, can be very damaging to us. So what happens after that, after you've decided that you don't want to harm others and you take on their belief systems and you keep holding them even when they're not appropriate, then we get into this behavior of predicting the external experiences of others and acting on ourselves. We can predict that this is what's going to happen if we behave this way. And then we get that saying, yes, you get a swat on your butt, you get taken out of the restaurant, you get told to sit quietly until you can control yourself, and then we get to go back in. So we miss out on this social experience. So again, I've predicted that this is what's going to happen to me as a child. I've confirmed it by it happening more than once. And then now I move into control. And control is literally self-punishment. So whenever you feel stubborn, you can track it back to a belief system that is showing you your behavior, your thoughts, your ideas are not acceptable, that these things will harm others. And in order to not harm others, to be kind to others, we will punish ourselves. It can be so easy. I remember having somebody offer me a choice, too, as a grown-up, as I'm learning to go through this. And they say, here, you can do this. And I would go through my list of, well, who is it going to harm? You know, what's the consequences of everything that I have this choice of? And should I really do it? And then not doing something that would have been absolutely fine, but using this control and punishing myself from, oh no, I can't go out with you tonight. You know, it's a school night and my kids have to go to bed on time. So no, I can't leave them with somebody else who might not perform the way I know this night needs to be performed for them to have the best day tomorrow. So I didn't go out with friends. I didn't do social things while my kids were growing up because I was, again, going into this stubbornness of holding these beliefs and not trusting that anything's going to be okay. So you see a cascade of experiences. By the end, there's a lack of trust. So I'm staying in control. I'm punishing myself. I'm not allowed to have any fun. And the solution was so simple. And the solution is in those moments, be kind to yourself. Now, we've been watching Judy and Vicky, especially in the forum, you've been able to see lately how they are turning around and being kind to themselves. Vicky showing all of this great fun that she's having and sharing it with us and being okay that she's openly sharing, because that can be uncomfortable to share who you are on this intimate level and then to trust that other people are going to be okay with who you are. And then Judy, too, just sharing as she gets this aha moment of how she could feel about herself and wanting this change and being willing to be vulnerable. Excellent examples we've had. Because in the past, most of us will go into stubborn. Well, it's not okay. I can't do it. And that's that self-punishment. And again, the solution to stubborn behavior is find out where you're not being kind to yourself. Trust that everything comes from love. And then just love yourself.
Yeah, what would you say was the difference between stubbornness and rebellion?
Rebellion is what happens when the person realizes they can no longer be stubborn, but they haven't actually moved into a good place. So you could move into a good place and not have to act out. So if you imagine a pendulum hanging down at center balance, and then you pull it all the way to the right, and you're holding it because you're trying to follow the rules, you're trying to cooperate, and then suddenly I'm at a breaking point. Now here's what happens. We will save our lives, or we will perish. So at this breaking point, we have a choice to either, again, continue to self-punish and control ourselves, or to break free and find the freedom we need to move our own energy. And it will act out in some of the most crazy ways. So you have this pulled all the way to the right. I'm not willing to have this disease, so therefore I must do something. And that's where rebellion swings you all the way to the other side at the left. Eventually, over time, people tend to come back to the pendulum hanging in the center of the two experiences. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, that's excellent. Yeah.
It's very obvious to see, too, once you understand the concept of the pendulum swing, you'll see people holding themselves, and suddenly they'll have this huge outburst, and you're like, oh, they were so nice, and they were so quiet. But energetically, one of our contracts is to save our own lives as part of being human. And so even though we want to do this for someone else, if it's killing us and we're not willing to die over it, then we will act out. Then the flip side of it is someone like me. I had so much restraint and so much control, being raised military Catholic, and so much trust that this was the right thing to do, that I was literally killing my body. I was giving myself multiple sclerosis. I gave myself a heart attack. I have these experiences because I was unwilling to harm others to the point that I could take my own life. I thought about suicide so many times because of how difficult it was to live under the pressure of this energy that would build and build and build, and I never let it bust out. So, again, one of our tenements of being human is to protect the life that we're given, the body that we're given. And that's why the brain has the control it does over us. But then we move out of free will into control, and if the control is strong enough, then we can break the ability to save our own lives to the point that we die. That's what disease is.
I have an experience on the other side of stubbornness, and it's sort of been a theme as long as I can remember, that I learned to be quiet and subtle about it, but I just would not tolerate people telling me what to do.
So actually there's stubbornness in there, yes, but you're doing it, but you're not going to allow yourself to be punished, so you're going to break out somehow, right?
Yeah, I mean what I learned about the social part was better to be discreet. Mm-hmm. That someone would say you can't do that, and what would go on inside my head was, well, we'll see. and what I found was there'd be times where my behavior would be predicated by what's socially acceptable. And sometimes it just really didn't feel good. And I just had a very low tolerance for it not feeling good. That low tolerance would push me to find some other way. And a lot of times that way would just, as I said, it would be discreet. And part of it's rebellion, but it's like a quiet rebellion. And the feeling I had is I have this flame burning inside me that's my aliveness. And when something starts to push on that flame, that's not going to happen, And it was a very precious feeling of autonomy. So it's something that I treasured. I treasured that desire to be the way I wanted to be.
Right. Very good. That lines up too with, it is, like you said, it is a form of rebellion, but it's a control form. So you're still under control, because you didn't just act out on impulse. You used thought. So you're still keeping yourself in a safe place while not totally conforming, so that you don't have to create internal disease. But there is still a low level of fight or flight occurring in those moments. You didn't have complete freedom, so there's still this feeling of pressure that would constantly build over and over, I would think.
Yeah, no, that's true.
Okay, this is Laura. I'll go ahead and talk. As you were telling this story just now, I could feel some of the pressures in places where there was this lack of freedom, and then, like you said, when it would touch the flame, it would bounce into, I have to claim my freedom now. Is that kind of how it felt?
Yes.
Well, I think what we're trying to do is get to a point where there's not a reaction at all. You're just in your complete freedom all the time.
Right.
So because there's a reaction, that shows, Christine, that there's still an element of control there that we're all dealing with. But in that particular story, that's how we can see it from the outside. It's like there's a story a long time ago. The Native American, the shaman, could see things that the rest of the people couldn't. And he could see a ship coming along the horizon, and no one else could see it because it wasn't in their wheelhouse to be able to see it. But the shaman had expanded his consciousness enough to know that these kinds of things existed. So it's the same kind of thing. When we have a trigger, that means it already exists within us somewhere. The story that I was going to tell right before that, I just wanted to bring that up, but the story that I was going to tell was one of the things that I grew up with was kind of like Christine said, you have to sit pretty, you have to talk, not to take up a lot of space. And it wasn't by my parents, it was by society as growing up as a girl. and the spout. So, you sit with your legs together. Whenever you walk, you walk and you don't attract attention. And then I got into dancing, which was the total opposite of that. So my pendulum swung is the total opposite of being, very, I mean, dancing is still controlled, but it's a different way of control, and it's a different way of expression. It unlocked so many things for me. And then as I was walking down the street with my husband, I realized how free I am, because if I feel like doing something, I just break out into the middle of it now without even thinking. In my journey, at least with movement of the body, going from a place of extreme control to breaking that control to now being able to move however I want.
Right, and when you move wherever you want now, it doesn't even occur to you that there'll be a problem, correct?
Right, correct.
Right.
I'm not aware of it unless someone points it out, and I'm like, oh, well, that's their issue.
Right, and that's what we're talking about, how we're starting at this place, and we're going to move through it, and the end goal is freedom. And freedom doesn't have a level of control where you question yourself in a way that you might be harming others, because you can trust that you're not harming anyone. You know who you are. You know everything comes from love, and that's the goal. So thank you, Laura, for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Okay, then we will go into the exercise for today. Let me take a look what that one was called.
So while you're looking that up, I'll just talk about, there was an experience that I had that was like Christine, it was an NDE, and where I went was a place that had absolutely no meaning, and I learned there that we assign meaning to everything. Whenever, was that Peter that was talking earlier?
Yes.
Hi, Peter. So whenever you were talking, I was able to go to that place of no meaning, and I was able to see some of the places where you were creating meaning. So I just wanted to let you know that. It wasn't just out of nowhere. I went to that place and looked down to try to help you find some peace as you were talking. So I hope that's okay with you.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
That kind of ties into how we're going to start week 5. We'll be starting something we call Return to Observation, and it's a daily exercise. It's going to do exactly that, to help you see where you've assigned meaning, where you have attachment, where you draw conclusions. And the exercises really do bring you your heightened awareness, so that it starts to become really easy to see what we're doing to ourselves. So week 5 should just blow you guys up for quite a bit. There should be a lot more freedom happening if you allow yourself the space to move through these exercises. For today's exercise is standing in place. The important part about standing in place is to realize how, even when we're just standing still, so for instance, if I'm waiting in line at the bank, I could do this exercise and realize that that I'm being impacted either by the ether, by the push and pull of people around me, by my belief systems about what they may or may not be thinking or doing, about how they may be perceiving me. I mean, there's so many ways that we're interacting, and we're moving our energy based on this interaction. And the standing in place exercise allows you at any point in time to check how you're impacting yourself. Now, it may not bring you the conscious understanding of how you're impacting yourself, but what it's going to bring you is the physical awareness of how you're moving your body's energy. A lot of people that have problems with dizziness, if they start doing this exercise, they will realize that they're moving something and it's creating this unstable energy flow in their body, and this is part of why they have dizziness. It's a really nice, simple exercise. It just requires that you can breathe and pay attention to your breath and realize where your body muscles are tensing and flexing while you're breathing, because you're going to notice something else too. A breath in causes one part of your energy to do one thing, and then the breath out causes another part. We have the hold at the top of a breath, and we have the hold at the bottom of the breath. And that's 4 different experiences of breath in the cycle. Through that cycle, you're going to realize that it also changes the way your body is handling energy. So just your breath affects you continuously all day long based on how your energy is being held in your body. Why does this matter? When we do certain energetic processes, being aware of how the breath impacts the body makes it so much easier. See, the gentlest way to move energy is through breath. And so being able to see what your breath is doing allows you to then be more profound and more pronounced in the way that you impact your body. There's some types of methods that we do later on that you can't even breathe through, because the breath itself, even though it's so light and so delicate, it will impact what you're trying to do through your DNA processing, that you can't even, you have to just be in that stillness. You can't hold your breath, but you have to be in the space between the inhale and the exhale, where there's no motion, there's no existence of breath, and yet breath is all that you have that does everything. So this is a really good starting place to help you guys get prepared for that, and that comes, more things that we'll do later on. Any questions?
Not for me. No questions.
Does anyone want to share anything about their holiday?
I cleaned all day.
I did as well in another way. So, yeah. I was just going to say the dust is, still settling, so I'll kind of leave it there.
Okay. I had an awareness that came up yesterday at lunch. We took my ex-mother-in-law out for her birthday, so it's me, some of the kids, and some other family and friend members. We're a large group at the table, and she's sitting there. She's 80, so she's 88 this year. She's sitting there next to the 2-year-old grandson, and he has a TV on the phone that he's using to entertain himself while the rest of us are having lively conversations. And it's not something he does often. He doesn't get to use electronics often, so it's really enticing to him when he does. So he's totally enthralled. And then Mary, my ex-mother-in-law, is sitting there looking at him and the phone and watching the videos. And I'm thinking, oh, does she feel left out? For a second, I thought, oh, not my job. I'm not going to anticipate that she's actually having a problem. I'm not even going to ask her if she's having a problem. I'll give her the space to communicate if she wants to. So I paused for a moment and held open energy for her to communicate anything if she wanted to. She glanced up at me and smiled and then looked back down. Today I got a long message from her thanking me for how lovely it was to enjoy everybody's conversation. And I thought, that's it. She has her own space. She's not at a place in her life where she wants to talk a lot. She likes to relax and hear others and the joy in others' lives and things that are happening that she no longer experiences. So she really did have a really good time. And it's so easily in the past I would have been interrupting and drawing her into the conversation and thinking that, this is the polite thing to do, is make sure she's included, instead of just trusting that she's where she wants to be and she's having the experience she wants to have. So I appreciated myself for being aware and having the space to allow others to be themselves this weekend. It was nice.
Amazing. Yes, thank you for sharing that.
What a gift. Yeah, what a gift.
That is big, very big.
Yeah, it can be really difficult not to give in to old behaviors, but the more you accentuate the life that you want to have, it gets easier and easier, guys. I look so forward to a year from now receiving messages saying, I had the best Easter because, and then you guys can share the great experiences with where you are in your lives. I appreciate all of those things. Okay, well, we're at the end of the half hour, and unless there's anything else, I'll say my goodbye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Good to hear from everybody.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Christine. Bye, Laura.
Bye.
Bye-bye.